Good morning. Does it seem like to anyone else that the world's changing more rapidly than you can possibly keep up with? When I did the devotional last week, I spoke a bit about the death of George Floyd and how that impacts my family in particular. I had no idea that a week later we'd be dealing with protests and riots and all sorts of other things. I think so many of us don't know how to react. And when we don't know how to react, a couple of things happen. And one of those things is sometimes we just kind of sit in our fear. And I don't want to leave us in a place of fear today. I want to leave us in a place full of hope and love and faith. And I want to direct our eyes to Jesus, because only Jesus can provide us with a solution. Only Jesus can provide us with true life. Only Jesus can provide us with reconciliation in times such as these. If you're like me, when the problems become seemingly insurmountable, you try to figure out, what would Jesus do in this situation? And I've had some days and hours to think on this and reflect a little bit about, what do I think Jesus would do? And this morning, I want to share a story with you because I think it helps us gain the perspective of, in the midst of anger and fear and hurt and death and systems that don't function the way they're supposed to, it helps us understand how Jesus would enter into those very things. And story is a wonderful way to communicate important points. Jesus himself spoke in stories called parables. And one of the things he would often say when he spoke in parables is he would say something like, "Let those who have ears hear." That is my prayer for us this morning, that we would have ears to hear what Jesus is saying to each of us. Oh, strange sight. I stumbled upon a story most strange, like nothing in my life, my street sense, my sly tongue had ever prepared me for. Hush, child. Hush now, and I'll tell it to you. Even before the dawn one Friday morning, I noticed a young man, handsome and strong, walking the alleys of our city. He was pulling an old cart filled with clothes, both bright and new. And he was calling in a clear tenor voice, "Rags!" Ah, the air was foul, and the first light filthy to be crossed by such sweet music. "Rags! New rags for old! I take your tired rags! Rags!" Now this is a wonder, I thought to myself. For the man stood 6'4", and his arms were like tree limbs, hard and muscular, and his eyes flashed intelligence. Could he find no better job than this, to be a ragman in the inner city? I followed him. My curiosity drove me, and I wasn't disappointed. Soon the ragman saw a woman sitting on her back porch. She was sobbing into a handkerchief, signing and shedding 1,000 tears. Her knees and elbows made a sad X. Her shoulders shook. Her heart was breaking. The ragman stopped his cart, and quietly he walked to the woman, stepping around tin cans, dead toys, and Pampers. "Give me your rag," he said gently, "and I'll give you another." He slipped the handkerchief from her eyes. She looked up, and he laid across her palm a linen cloth so clean and new that it shined. She blinked from the gift to the giver. Then, as he began to pull his cart again, the ragman did a strange thing. He put her stained handkerchief to his own face, and then he began to weep, to sob as grievously as she had done, his shoulders shaking, yet she was left without a tear. "This is a wonder," I breathed to myself. And I followed the sobbing ragman like a child who cannot turn away from mystery. "Rags! Rags! New rags for old!" In a little while, when the sky showed gray behind the rooftops, I could see the shredded curtains hanging out black windows. The ragman came upon a girl whose head was wrapped in a bandage, whose eyes were empty. Blood soaked her bandage. A single line of blood ran down her cheek. Now the tall ragman looked upon this child with pity, and he drew a lovely yellow bonnet from his cart. "Give me your rag," he said, tracing his own line on her cheek, "and I'll give you mine." The child could only gaze at him while he loosened the bandage, removed it, and tied it to his own head. The bonnet he set on hers, and I gasped at what I saw, for with the bandage went the wound. Against his brow it ran a darker, more substantial blood, his own. "Rags! Rags! I take old rags!" cried the sobbing, bleeding, strong, intelligent ragman. The sun hurt both the sky now and my eyes. The ragman seemed more and more to hurry. "Are you going to work?" he asked a man who leaned against a telephone pole. The man shook his head. The ragman pressed him. "Do you have a job?" "Are you crazy?" sneered the other. He pulled away from the pole, revealing the right sleeve of his jacket flat, the cuff stuffed into his pocket. He had no arm. "So," said the ragman, "give me your jacket and I'll give you mine." So much quiet authority in his voice. The one-armed man took off his jacket, and so did the ragman, and I trembled at what I saw, for the ragman's arm stayed in its sleeve, and when the other put it on, he had two good arms, thick as tree limbs. But the ragman had only one. "Go to work," he said. After that, he found a drunk, lying unconscious beneath an army blanket, an old man hunched, wizened, and sick. He took that blanket and wrapped it around himself, but for the drunk he left new clothes. And now I had to run to keep up with the ragman. Though he was weeping uncontrollably and bleeding freely at the forehead, pulling his cart with one arm, stumbling for drunkenness, falling again and again, exhausted, old and sick, yet he went with terrible speed. On spider's legs he skittered through the alleys of the city, this mile and the next, until he came to its limits, and then he rushed beyond. I wept to see the change in this man. I hurt to see his sorrow. And yet, I need to see where he was going in such haste, perhaps to know what drove him so. The little old ragman, he came to a landfill. He came to the garbage pits. And I waited to help him in what he did, but I hung back, hiding. He climbed a hill. With tormented labor, he cleared a little space on that hill. Then he sighed. He lay down. He pillowed his head on a handkerchief and a jacket. He covered his bones with an army blanket. And he died. Oh, how I cried to witness that death. I slumped in a junked car and wailed and mourned as one who has no hope, because I had come to love the ragman. Every other face had faded in the wonder of this man, and I cherished him. But he died. I sobbed myself to sleep. I did not know. How could I know that I slept through Friday night and Saturday and its night too? But then, on Sunday morning, I was awakened by a violence. Light, pure, hard, demanding light slammed against my sour face, and I blinked. And I looked, and I saw the first wonder of all. There was the ragman folding the blanket most carefully, a scar on his forehead, but alive. And besides that, healthy. There was no sign of sorrow or age, and all the rags he had gathered shined for cleanliness. Well, then I lowered my head and trembled for all that I had seen. I myself walked to the ragman. I told him my name with shame, for I was a sorry figure next to him. Then I took off my clothes in that place, and I said to him with dear yearning in my voice, "Dress me." And he dressed me. My Lord, he put new rags on me, and I am a wonder beside him. The ragman, the Christ. This story, the ragman, is probably my favorite story. I've told that around many campfires. It helps me understand something that I continue to reiterate to our congregation through sermon and devotional, something that Jesus made very clear during his ministry here on earth. God is love. God is love. And to be a follower of God means also to love. That doesn't mean that we accept every single thing that is going on, but it certainly means that when we enter into a situation, we don't take our power and use it over others. For Jesus, being equal with God, descended from the throne in heaven down to earth, to live as a man, to die on a cross, the death of a criminal. Jesus' life is the example of using power for others rather than over others. Jesus' example was one of love. He said, "The world will know that you follow me by the way that you love one another." We, as followers of Jesus, must enter into every situation, every conversation, every confrontation with love. And it may cost us everything, as it once did our Father in heaven. But that is the wonderful and gracious price of being dressed in the rags of the Christ, of representing him, not just in name, but in action and in deed. So my friends, wherever you may be, and whatever you're considering, and whatever you are struggling with today, I want to encourage you, enter in with love. Have a good day.